The term Narrow Bantu, excluding those languages classified as Bantoid by Malcolm Guthrie, 1948, was introduced in the 1960s. The prefix Bay specifically refers to people. Endonymically, the term for cultural objects including language is formed with the key noun class, Nguni Isi, as in Kiswahili, Swahili language and culture, isiZulu, Zulu language and culture, and Kiganda, Ganda religion and culture. In the 1980s, South African linguists suggested referring to these languages as Kintu. The word Kintu exists in some places, but it means thing, with no relation to the concept of language. In addition, delegates at the African Languages Association of Southern Africa Conference in 1984 reported that, in some places, the term Kintu has a derogatory significance. This is because Kintu refers to things and is used as a dehumanizing term for people who have lost their dignity. In addition, Kintu is a figure in some mythologies. In the 1990s, the term Kintu was still occasionally used by South African linguists. But in contemporary decolonial South African linguistics, the term N2 languages is used. Within the fierce debate among linguists about the word Bantu, Seidensticker 2024 indicates that there has been a profound conceptual trend in which a purely technical term, without any non-linguistic connotations, was transformed into a designation referring indiscriminately to language, culture, society, and race. The Bantu languages descend from a common Proto-Bantu language, which is believed to have been spoken in what is now Cameroon in Central Africa. An estimated 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, 1000 BC to 500 BC, speakers of the Proto-Bantu language began a series of migrations eastward and southward, carrying agriculture with them. This Bantu expansion came to dominate sub-Saharan Africa east of Cameroon, an area where Bantu peoples now constitute nearly the entire population. Some other sources estimate the Bantu expansion started closer to 3000 BC. The technical term Bantu, meaning human beings, or simply people, was first used by Wilhelm Bleek, 1827 to 1875, as the concept is reflected in many of the languages of this group. A common characteristic of Bantu languages is that they use words such as muntu or mutu for human being, or in simplistic terms, person, and the plural prefix for human nouns, starting with mu, class 1, in most languages is ba, class 2, thus giving Bantu for people. Bleek, and later Karl Meinhof, pursued extensive studies comparing the grammatical structures of Bantu languages. There are several hundred Bantu languages. Depending on the definition of language or dialect, it is estimated that there are between 440 and 680 distinct languages. The total number of speakers is in the hundreds of millions, ranging at roughly 350 million in the mid-2010s, roughly 30% of the population of Africa, or roughly 5% of the total world population. About 90 million speakers, 2015, divided into some 400 ethnic or tribal groups, are found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo alone. The larger of the individual Bantu groups have populations of several million, e.g. the Baganda people of Uganda, 5.5 million as of 2014, the Shona of Zimbabwe, 17.6 million as of 2020, the Zulu of South Africa, 14.2 million as of 2016, the Luba of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 28.8 million as of 2010, the Sukuma of Tanzania, 10.2 million as of 2016, the Kikuyu of Kenya, 8.1 million as of 2019, the Xhosa people of Southern Africa, 9.6 million as of 2011, Botswana of Southern Africa, 8.2 million as of 2020, and the Pedi of South Africa, 7 million as of 2018. Abantu is the Ndebele, Swazi, Xhosa, and Zulu word for people. It is the plural of the word umuntu, meaning person, and is based on the stem Ntu plus the plural prefix aba. In linguistics, the word Bantu, for the language families and its speakers, is an artificial term based on the reconstructed Proto-Bantu term for people or humans. It was first introduced into modern academia as Bantu by Wilhelm Bleek in 1857 or 1858 and popularized in his Comparative Grammar of 1862. The name was said to be coined to represent the word for people in loosely reconstructed Proto-Bantu, from the plural noun class prefix be, categorizing people, and the root entu, some, entity, any, e.g., Xhosa Umtu person, a Bantu people, Zulu, Indebele, and Swazi Umuntu person, a Bantu people. There is no native term for the people who speak Bantu languages because they are not an ethnic group. People speaking Bantu languages refer to their languages by ethnic endonyms, which did not have an indigenous concept prior to European contact, for the larger ethno-linguistic phylum named by 19th-century European linguists. Bleek's coinage was inspired by the anthropological observation of groups self-identifying as people or the true people. That is, idiomatically, the reflexes of Bantu in the numerous languages often have connotations of personal character traits as encompassed under the value system of Ubuntu, also known as Hunhu in Shishona or Botho in Sesotho, rather than just referring to all human beings. The root in Proto-Bantu is reconstructed as Ntu. Versions of the word Bantu, that is, the root plus the class 2 noun class prefix ba, occur in all Bantu languages. For example, as Bantu in Kikongo, Kituba, Chiluba, and Kiluba, Watu in Swahili, Wanthu in Tumbuka, Anthu in Chichewa, Batu in Lingala, Bato in Douala, Abanto in Gusii, Andu in Kamba and Kikuyu, Abantu in Kirundi, Lusoga, Zulu, Xhosa, Runyoro, and Luganda, Wandru in Shingazija, Abantru in Mapando and Ndebele, Bathfu in Futhi, Bantfu in Swati and Bhaka, Banhu in Kisukuma, Banu in Lala, Vanhu in Shona and Tsonga, Batho in Sesotho, Tswana and Sepedi, Antu in Meru, Andu in Embu, Vandu in some Luhya dialects, Vathu in Venda, and Bhandu in Nyakyusa. Within the fierce debate among linguists about the word Bantu, Seidensticker, 2024, indicates that there has been a profound conceptual trend in which a purely technical term, without any non-linguistic connotations, was transformed into a designation referring indiscriminately to language, culture, society, and race. Origins and expansion. Bantu languages derive from the Proto-Bantu reconstructed language, estimated to have been spoken about 4,000 to 3,000 years ago in West-Central Africa, the area of modern-day Cameroon. They were supposedly spread across Central, East, and Southern Africa in the so-called Bantu expansion, comparatively rapid dissemination taking roughly 2 millennia and dozens of human generations during the first millennium BCE and the first millennium CE. The Bantu expansion was a major series of migrations of the original Proto-Bantu speaking group, which spread from an original nucleus around West-Central Africa across Central Africa, Eastern Africa, and Southern Africa. In the process, the Proto-Bantu speaking settlers absorbed, displaced, and possibly in some cases replaced pre-existing hunter-gatherer and pastoralist groups that they encountered. There is linguistic evidence for this expansion. A great many of the languages which are spoken across sub-equatorial Africa are remarkably similar to each other, suggesting a recent common cultural origin of their original speakers. The linguistic core of the Bantu languages, which constitute a branch of the Atlantic Congo language family, was located in the southern regions of Cameroon. Genetic. Evidence also indicates that there was a large human migration from Central Africa, with varying levels of admixture with local population. The expansion is believed to have taken place between about 6,000 and 1,500 years ago, approximately 4,000 BCE to 500 CE. Linguistic analysis suggests that the expansion proceeded in two directions. The first, termed the Western Stream, proceeded south either along the Atlantic coast or following rivers through the Congo rainforest, reaching central Angola around 500 BCE. The second, termed the Eastern Stream, proceeded east either along the northern fringe of the forest or along the Ubangi River, and reached west of Lake Victoria around 500 BCE. From there, they split into two groups, with one heading west to regroup with the western stream and the other dispersing over eastern and southern Africa. The expansion reached South Africa probably as early as 300 CE. Bantuists believe that the Bantu expansion most likely began on the highlands between Cameroon and Nigeria. The 60,000-kilometer Kator-Mambila region straddling the borderlands here has been identified as containing remnants of the Bantu who stayed home as the bulk of Bantu speakers moved away from the region. Archaeological evidence from the separate works of Jean Hurault, 1979, 1986, and 1988, and Rigobert Touchet, 2000 in the region, indicates cultural continuity from 3000 BCE until today. The majority of the groups of the Bamenda Highlands, occupied for 2,000 years until today, somewhat south and contiguous with the Mambila region, have an ancient history of descent from the north in the direction of the Mambila region. Initially, archaeologists believed that they could find archaeological similarities in the region's ancient cultures that the Bantu speakers were held to have traversed. Linguists, classifying the languages and creating a genealogical table of relationships, believed they could reconstruct material culture elements. They believed that the expansion was caused by the development of agriculture, the making of ceramics, and the use of iron, which permitted new ecological zones to be exploited. In 1966, Roland Oliver published an article presenting these correlations as a reasonable hypothesis. Ancestral components in Bantu-speaking populations. The hypothesized Bantu expansion pushed out or assimilated the hunter-forager Proto-Khoisan, who had formerly inhabited southern Africa. In eastern and southern Africa, Bantu speakers may have adopted livestock husbandry from other unrelated Cushitic and Nilotic-speaking peoples they encountered. Herding practices reached the far south several centuries before Bantu-speaking migrants did. Archaeological, linguistic, genetic, and environmental evidence all support the conclusion that the Bantu expansion was a significant human migration. Generally, the movements of Bantu language-speaking peoples from the Cameroon-Nigeria border region throughout much of sub-Saharan Africa radically reshaped the genetic structure of the continent and led to extensive admixture between migrants and local populations. A 2023 genetic study of 1,487 Bantu speakers sampled from 143 populations across 14 African countries revealed that the expansion occurred 4,000 years ago in Western Africa. The results showed that Bantu speakers received significant gene flow from local groups in regions they expanded into. Based on dental evidence, Irish, 2016, concluded that the common ancestors of West African and Proto-Bantu peoples may have originated in the western region of the Sahara, amid the Kiphian period at Gobero, and may have migrated southward from the Sahara into various parts of West Africa, e.g., Benin, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, as a result of desertification of the Green Sahara in 7000 BCE. From Nigeria and Cameroon, agricultural Proto-Bantu peoples began to migrate, and amid migration diverged into East Bantu peoples, e.g., Democratic Republic of Congo, and West Bantu peoples, e.g., Congo, Gabon, between 2500 BCE and 1200 BCE. He suggests that Igbo people and Yoruba people may have admixture from back-migrated Bantu peoples. Before the expansion of Bantu-speaking farmers, Central, Southern, and Southeast Africa were likely populated by Pygmy foragers, Khoisan-speaking hunter-gatherers, Nilo-Saharan-speaking herders, and Cushitic-speaking pastoralists. Central Africa. It is thought that Central African Pygmies and Bantu speakers branched out from a common ancestral population, c. 70,000 years ago. Many Batwa groups speak Bantu languages. However, a considerable portion of their vocabulary is not Bantu in origin. Much of this vocabulary is botanical, deals with honey collecting, or is otherwise specialized for the forest, and is shared between Western Batwa groups. It has been proposed that this is the remnant of an independent Western Batwa, Mbenga or Baka language, Southeast Africa. Prior to the arrival of Bantu speakers in Southeast Africa, Cushitic-speaking peoples had migrated into the region from the Ethiopian highlands and other more northerly areas. The first waves consisted of southern Cushitic speakers who settled around Lake Turkana and parts of Tanzania beginning around 5,000 years ago. Many centuries later, around 1000 CE, some eastern Cushitic speakers also settled in northern and coastal Kenya. Did you know that before the Bantu expansion there were other people living in Southeast Africa? See, the Khoisan-speaking hunter-gatherers lived in Southeast Africa for hundreds of years before the Bantu expansion. The Khoisan people are still there today, but their population has been greatly reduced and they've been pushed to the margins of society. The second group of people who lived in Southeast Africa before the Bantu expansion were the Nilo-Saharan-speaking herder populations. They're still there too, but like the Khoisan, their numbers have been greatly reduced, and both groups are still fighting for land rights to this day. The Bantu expansion began around 400 years ago, and these three groups were the ones that were here before that. Did you know that before the Bantu expansion, Southeast Africa was home to Khoisan-speaking hunter-gatherers? The Khoisan people are known for their unique language family, which includes Kuko, Kukoan, and Sandawe. These languages are characterized by their click consonants, which are produced by clicking the tongue against the roof of the mouth. The Khoisan people have a rich oral tradition, and their stories were passed down through generations by word of mouth. Unfortunately, many of these stories have been lost or distorted over time. However, we do have some written records from the early colonial period that give us a glimpse into their culture. One such record is a report from a missionary who visited a Kuko village in the 1820s. He described the people he met there as being tall and well-built with reddish-brown skin. They were hunters and gatherers, and their diet consisted of meat, fruit, and vegetables. Sadly, most of their land has been taken over by the Bantu people, who are of a different ethnic group. The Bantu expansion began around 300 years ago and is believed to be the largest migration of people in human history. Today, the Khoisan people are a minority in South Africa, but they continue to thrive. Their traditional way of life has largely been preserved, and their languages and cultures are celebrated. Did you know that there were black people in Southeast Africa before the Bantu expansion? See, when we think of the Bantu people, we often picture them as the first inhabitants of Southeast Africa. But that's not actually true. There were people living there before them who spoke Khoisan languages. These were small groups of hunter-gatherers who lived in the region for thousands of years. Their language, which is called San, is still spoken by some groups today, like the San people of the Kalahari Desert. The San were the first inhabitants of Southeast Africa, but they weren't the only ones. There were other groups of hunter-gatherers who lived in the region, including the Kuko, who were more nomadic and traveled around in small clans. They lived off the land, hunting animals and gathering plants for food. When the Bantu people began to migrate into Southeast Africa, these groups were pushed further and further away until they eventually disappeared. But their language and culture lived on through the San people. So next time you hear someone say that black people are foreigners in Southeast Africa, just remember that it wasn't that long ago that this region was home to a variety of different ethnic groups, including several Khoisan-speaking groups. Khoisan-speaking hunter-gatherers also inhabited Southeast Africa before the Bantu expansion. Nilo-Saharan-speaking herder populations comprised a third group of the area's pre-Bantu expansion inhabitants, Southern Africa. Before the Bantu expansion, Khoisan-speaking peoples inhabited Southern Africa. Their descendants have largely mixed with other peoples and adopted other languages. A few still live by foraging, often supplemented by working for neighboring farmers in the arid regions around the Kalahari Desert, while a larger number of Nama continue their traditional subsistence by raising livestock in Namibia and adjacent South Africa. The oldest pottery found in an area inhabited by Bantu speakers, Shumlaka in northern Cameroon, dates to 5000 BCE. The Proto-Bantu speakers lived in villages and grew palm oil, nuts, grains, and possibly yams. They used stone tools, had goats and guinea fowl, and built boats used for fishing. Despite intensive research, the cause of the Bantu expansion and that of the directions taken is still unclear, leading some scholars to believe it began by accident. There is, however, consensus that there were multiple dispersal events, c. 5000 BCE to c. 500 CE. It seems likely that the expansion of the Bantu-speaking people from their core region in West Africa began around 4000–3500 BCE. It is unclear whether the first dispersal scenario resulted in migration or multiple smaller dispersals occurring at different times. Although early models posited that the early speakers were both iron-using and agricultural, definitive archaeological evidence that they used iron does not appear until as late as 400 BCE, though they were agricultural. The Bantu-speaking people split into two broad groups which dispersed in different directions, termed the Western Stream and the Eastern Stream. Western Stream. Sites south of Shumlaka in southern Cameroon and Gabon indicate the Western Stream began between 5000 and 3000 BCE. Initial progress was very slow, and central Cameroon was only reached around 1500 BCE. This slowness was due to the initial lack of iron tools, which would have made clearing the forest considerably easier, and the Western Stream likely followed the coast and the major rivers of the Congo system southward. They may also have used the sea to reach the southern end of the rainforest. It is thought that the degradation of the West Central African rainforest by climate change between 2000 BCE and 500 BCE aided the expansion. They reached central Angola by around 500 BCE. Eastern Stream. The Eastern Stream, thought to have started later than the Western Stream, dispersed east, possibly along the northern edge of the rainforest or along the Ubangi River. Urewi pottery indicates they reached west of Lake Victoria by 500 BCE. It was one of Africa's oldest iron-smelting centers. By the 1st century BCE, Bantu-speaking communities in the Great Lakes region developed iron-forging techniques that enabled them to produce carbon steel. Dispersal from the Great Lakes region occurred in two more streams. One went west to meet the Western Stream in the DR Congo and Angola, while the other went south and spread across eastern and southern Africa. Archaeological findings have shown that by 100 BCE to 300 CE, Bantu-speaking communities were present at the coastal areas of Misasa in Tanzania and Kwale in Kenya. These communities also integrated and intermarried with the communities already present at the coast. From 300 CE, through participation in the long-existing Indian Ocean trade route, these communities established links with Arabian and Indian traders, leading to the development of the Swahili culture. Other pioneering groups had reached modern KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa by 300 CE along the coast, and the modern Limpopo province by 500 CE. Interactions between Bantu speakers and hunter-gatherers. Throughout the expansion, Bantu speakers interacted with various Pygmy groups and Khoisan speakers, hunter-gatherer groups, and Nilo-Saharan, Afro-Asiatic, and other Niger-Congo speakers, agricultural groups. Research indicates there was copious cultural and physical contact between Bantu speakers and hunter-gatherers, with intermarriages common. Relations were complex as languages, technologies, rituals, and genes were shared. The larger Bantu-speaking populations, aided by animal herding, would have often absorbed the smaller hunter-gatherer populations, with hunter-gatherer women migrating to Bantu-speaking groups, and Bantu-speaking men migrating to hunter-gatherer groups. This is supported by contemporary cultural customs that women from agricultural groups shouldn't marry men from foraging groups, while the reverse is more accepted. The use of click sounds, usually associated with Khoisan languages, in southern Bantu languages can be viewed as evidence of this. Oral traditions suggest displacement was sometimes the result of conflict. There is a lack of evidence for admixture in Angola, causing speculation of population replacement, however not enough to make a conclusion. Manfred K. H. Eggert stated that the current archaeological record in the Central African rainforest is extremely spotty and consequently far from convincing, so as to be taken as a reflection of a steady influx of Bantu speakers into the forest, let alone movement on a larger scale. Seidensticker 2024 indicates that the prevalent paradigm for the Bantu expansion has a forced connection between Central African ceramics and Central African languages, where the geographic location of speakers of the Bantu languages are treated as synonymous with the geographic location of ceramic remnants. The popular approach of attempting to correlate linguistic reconstructions with archaeological data has resulted in a propagation of the faulty presumption and circular reasoning that the earliest ceramic manufacturing in a given area is evidence for the earliest presence of Bantu speakers. Within the fierce debate among linguists about the word Bantu, Seidensticker 2024 indicates that there has been a profound conceptual trend in which a purely technical term, without any non-linguistic connotations, was transformed into a designation referring indiscriminately to language, culture, society, and race. Bantu expansion. Scientists from the Institut Pasteur and the CNRS, together with a broad international consortium, retraced the migratory routes of the Bantu populations, which were previously a source of debate. The scientists from the Institut Pasteur and the CNRS, together with a broad international consortium, retraced the migratory routes of the Bantu populations, which were previously a source of debate. The scientists used data from a vast genomic analysis of more than 2,000 samples taken from individuals in 57 populations throughout sub-Saharan Africa to trace the Bantu expansion. During a wave of expansion that began 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, Bantu-speaking populations, some 310 million people as of 2023, gradually left their original homeland West Central Africa and traveled to the eastern and southern regions of the African continent. During the Bantu expansion, Bantu-speaking peoples absorbed or displaced many earlier inhabitants, with only a few modern peoples such as Pygmy groups in Central Africa, the Hadza people in northern Tanzania, and various Khoisan populations across southern Africa, remaining in existence into the era of European contact. Archaeological evidence attests to their presence in areas subsequently occupied by Bantu speakers. Researchers have demonstrated that the Khoisan of the Kalahari are remnants of a huge ancestral population that may have been the most populous group on the planet prior to the Bantu expansion. Biochemist Stephan Schuster of Nanyang Technological University in Singapore and colleagues found that the Khoisan population began a drastic decline when the Bantu farmers spread through Africa 4,000 years ago. Hypotheses of early Bantu expansion. Before the Bantu expansion had been definitively traced, starting from their origins in the region between Cameroon and Nigeria, two main scenarios of the Bantu expansion were hypothesized: an early expansion to Central Africa and a single origin of the dispersal radiating from there, or an early separation into an eastward and a southward wave of dispersal, with one wave moving across the Congo basin toward East Africa and another moving south along the African coast and the Congo River system toward Angola. Genetic analysis shows a significant clustered variation of genetic traits among Bantu language speakers by region, suggesting admixture from prior local populations. Bantu speakers of South Africa, Xhosa, Venda, showed substantial levels of the SAK and Western African Bantu AACs and low levels of the East African Bantu AAC. The latter is also present in Bantu speakers from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. The results indicate distinct East African Bantu migration into southern Africa and are consistent with linguistic and archaeological evidence of East African Bantu migration from an area west of Lake Victoria and the incorporation of Kuko ancestry into several of the Southeast Bantu populations, 1,500 to 1,000 years ago. Bantu-speaking migrants would have also interacted with some Afro-Asiatic outlier groups in the southeast, mainly Cushitic, as well as Nilotic and Central Sudanic-speaking groups. Cattle terminology in use amongst the relatively few modern Bantu pastoralist groups suggests that the acquisition of cattle may have been from Central Sudanic, Kuliak, and Cushitic-speaking neighbors. Linguistic evidence also indicates that the customs of milking cattle were also directly modeled from Cushitic cultures in the area. Cattle terminology in Southern African Bantu languages differs from that found among more northerly Bantu-speaking peoples. One recent suggestion is that Cushitic speakers had moved south earlier and interacted with the most northerly of Khoisan speakers who acquired cattle from them, and that the earliest arriving Bantu speakers in turn got their initial cattle from Cushitic-influenced Khoi-speaking people. Under this hypothesis, larger later Bantu-speaking immigration subsequently displaced or assimilated that southernmost extension of the range of Cushitic speakers. Based on dental evidence, Irish 2016 concluded Proto-Bantu peoples may have originated in the western region of the Sahara amid the Kiphian period at Gobero and may have migrated southward from the Sahara into various parts of West Africa, e.g., Benin, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, as a result of desertification of the Green Sahara in 7000 BCE. From Nigeria and Cameroon, agricultural Proto-Bantu peoples began to migrate, and amid migration diverged into East Bantu peoples, e.g., Democratic Republic of Congo, and West Bantu peoples, e.g., Congo, Gabon, between 2500 BCE and 1200 BCE. Irish 2016 also views Igbo people and Yoruba people as being possibly back-migrated Bantu peoples. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, Bantu-speaking states began to emerge in the Great Lakes region and in the savanna south of the Central African rainforests. The Monomotapa kings built the Great Zimbabwe Complex, a civilization ancestral to the Shona people. Comparable sites in southern Africa include Bumbusi in Zimbabwe and Manyikeni in Mozambique.